Let's begin with a verse from 1 John 4:1. Beloved, do not trust every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they belong to God. This verse from John is the overarching of our topic today on discernment. Discernment is a centuries-old way of going through life, a concept introduced by Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Discernment involves understanding the movements within our hearts and mind to recognize whether they are leading toward God, what is good and virtuous, or away from God, what's less good, or the false spirit. These movements can be your thoughts, imaginations, emotions, inclinations, desires, feelings, repulsions, and attachments. It is a method of sorting things out so that you can make your way through your reality with some degree of knowing that you are following God's will in a particular set of circumstances. When Saint Ignatius refers to spirits, he is generally talking about the inner movements and influences on the soul. The term spirits refers to these forces influencing our inner life. The good spirit leads us towards peace, love, joy, and ultimately closer to God. The evil spirit or the false spirit tries to lead us away from God, inducing anxiety, doubt, pride, or false joys that are superficial. Nearly every moment that we are awake, we are engaged in decision-making. While most of these choices are trivial, some carry significant implications in our lives. For example, should I get out of bed to go for a run? Or should I stay in bed and get more sleep? Should I accept the job offer abroad? Or should I stay in the company I am with here in the Philippines? Discernment always involves choosing between two goods, such as a job offer abroad, or staying here in the Philippines, or going for a run, or getting more rest. If our decision is between something good and something evil, such as cheating on a test, that's not a matter of discernment. We just need to know what is right. Let's take, for example, the first small discernment that I mentioned, to run or to rest. Both are good for my health. But what does my body need at this moment, this present time? Maybe also taking into consideration, am I just being lazy? Or am I driven to run because I am numbing something I don't want to feel? Now take a moment of silence and look through your day. would have been the trivial and significant decisions you made today? You may pause this video and take your time. You may write on your journal as many moments of decision making you made today. What moved you to decide on that particular thing or situation? How did you make decisions today? Which decisions were fast and which decisions needed time? Discernment starts in slowing down, quieting our hearts, and listening to the ways God is leading. But the problem is sometimes we move ahead of God. We let circumstances, our emotions, especially our fears and desires, decide for us. It means approaching each day, each situation, each person, each feelings evoked in any circumstance with an open mind and heart that's not already bogged down with our own opinions and ideas of what it is saying. It means coming with time to pause and to mull over everything with God's invitation to listen. If we're always impatient, we leave little space for God's direction to resonate in our already crowded schedules and minds. I want you to ponder this fundamental issue of listening, upon which our experience of God ultimately hinges. Let's do a situational exercise on discernment. Read the three couples in the next slide that I will show you. And again, you may pause this video to go through each short story. Now, in considering the story of the couple's different attitudes to life, observe your responses. Notice where you are drawn, where your heart is most at peace. Dialogue with your own wisdom. Take time to have a conversation with God, with Jesus, or another person you have loved. Let's begin. Three married sisters with their partners routinely buy a lotto ticket each week. One week, the ticket won a substantial amount of money, so the couples shared the prize equally. The win caused each couple to think about the morality of receiving and having so much money. They were not sure what to do. So they came together a few weeks later to discuss their fortune and their ideas about what might be the best way to manage this potential life-changing amount of money. Now, here are the three stories. Again, you may pause the video to read each one of them. What questions ran through your mind when you were doing the exercise? The list of questions could go on couldn't it? Our lives are an ever changing catalog of intricately woven personal inquiries that we each need divine direction to navigate moment by moment. But have you sincerely taken time to hear, to see, to wait, to watch, to allow for the margins that would give God an opportunity to offer you that which you claim to desire so earnestly? Or have you already filled in every conceivable space with your own opinions, ideas, decisions, and actions? A space that God might otherwise fill with His grace to listen and just be with you. One of the most common reasons why we don't hear from God is perhaps the most obvious. We're not listening. We don't hear because our inner world is noisy. And because of the noise within, we look for alternatives to mute the noise by overworking our attachments to things and people, and even coursing through any activity or involvement in religious or spiritual activity that at face value we may find some temporary comfort. Now let's take a pause. I invite you to write the questions on your mind from the earlier activity, or maybe you may have some thoughts in your mind right now that needs your attention. This time, listen. Listen to yourself. Listen to your emotions. Listen to your body. Listen to your thoughts. Write anything you notice about yourself while you're listening. A while ago, I briefly mentioned that even our involvement in religious activities may take us away from listening to God. But how can that be? I go to church and hear Mass. I read and memorize the Bible. I even serve the church by joining different kinds of ministry groups and events. No? Spiritual bypassing is coined by the psychologist John Wellwood in 1984. It is the use of religious or spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with our painful feelings, unresolved wounds, and developmental needs. It is masking your internal pain. Spiritual bypassing is a form of defense mechanism of avoidance and reframing the mind and the heart that, in a way, invalidates the reality of your journey. We tend not to have very much tolerance for facing, entering, going through, and working through our pain. Strongly, we prefer pain numbing solutions. This is what I mentioned earlier about temporary comfort, a quick fix, a quick relief, Also, this is what St. Ignatius says about the evil spirit, the false joys that are superficial. Now, what does spiritual bypassing look like? Let's take a look at these two columns. The first column says what the emotions need, while the other column of spiritual bypassing gives a quick answer to shut down the needs of the emotion. Spiritual bypassing is a significant pitfall that we are all at risk of experiencing on our spiritual awakening journey. This pitfall is essentially our tendency to ignore the entirety of what it means to be a human being. In other words, it can be very easy for us to ignore the darker elements of who we are and instead focus on emphasizing our lighter, more comfortable elements of awakening. But what if we offer those emotions to God? That sadness, that anger, that resistance to forgive, and those fears. What if God wants to be invited to listen to those deep emotions? What if in those deep emotions, we find God in the most intimate way of knowing? Spiritual bypassing is a very persistent shadow of spirituality manifesting in many forms. On your right is a list of how spiritual bypassing manifests in stealth mode in our daily lives. Authentic spiritual journey invites us to cease turning away from our painful emotions, from numbing ourselves and expecting spirituality to make us feel better. Spirituality invites us to go through the pain, to honestly say, I am not okay after all the retreats or Bible studies I have attended. I need more help. This is the movement of one of those who I accompany from her unconscious trauma, a disbelief and shame to accept her trauma, to an expansion of her consciousness that parts of her were still in pain and that God desires for her to heal and seek more help. In a nutshell, the spiritual journey does not negate our body or our reality. If you want to know more on this, I have included an additional video resource at the end of this recording entitled Spirituality and Mental Health. Now I would like to challenge you to break the walls of fear and dig deeper to your heart. In your journal, look back at times when you neglected your inner truth, your emotions, and resorted to spiritual bypassing. In this activity, offer to God what you have discovered. Listen. What is God inviting you to do and become with this offering? The hard work of discerning God's Spirit is journeying to our innermost selves, The self that acknowledges the darkness and shadow, not only the light. When we ignore many of the deep-seated and uncomfortable aspects of ourselves, we do not give God the chance to hold us, see us, be with us in the darkest parts of ourselves. The spiritual journey is not always pretty. In fact, often it is the most shattering, tumultuous, and testing experience we can go through in life. But only once we emerge from the embers of our destruction can we be transformed from a heart of stone to a heart of flesh. Discernment, when correctly practiced, allows for a depth of introspection that counteracts spiritual bypassing. It encourages us to face our feelings and inner experiences rather than bypass them. Our emotion, thought, or desire, no matter how seemingly insignificant or difficult, can reveal something about God's presence and action in our lives. The process of discernment allows us to sift through these inner experiences. It encourages us to not just focus on the blissful, transcendent, or seemingly holy experiences, but also to engage deeply with our emotional pain, psychological challenges, and worldly struggles. It's in the grappling with these less comfortable aspects of our existence that we often encounter God in the most intimate way and develop a more authentic spiritual journey. This is finding God in all things.